This one I think we're supposed to be officially talking about function. And we're going to, but we got a little bit of build up first, right? So first, let's take what we've learned so far and move it into the realm of scripts. Because we've been doing what's called interactive scripting so far, right? So, one of the other best things about PowerShell is that whatever you do in the interactive session is exactly what you do in the script. So if I want to say something like cd whack and then cd my backups, right, and so on, then that's exactly what you do. You can do it all in the same thing, right? You could, I mean, that's not very efficient, right? You would say cd c colon specs, you know, c colon my backups, right? You would do the whole thing. But you can do it that way. And in fact, when I script in SQL, and I'm going to kind of pseudocode this out for you a little bit, right? So let's say that, in fact, I might still be there. Okay, so here, I'm in the SP tree. Let's get back to the database tree. So I'll say cd dot dot. There we go, I'm in the databases. So let's say I want to script out all the objects. I have to cd to tables and then script it out. And then have to go back up, go to SPs, script it out, right? Go back up, script out whatever else, functions and whatever else, right? So here's what that looks like interactively. I would say cd tables, and then we'll just say script. That's that pseudocode, right? That stands for that whole line that we did before. And then when I'm finished with that, I do cd dot dot, cd procedures, run that same line of script again, go back up, and so on, right? So that's how I do it interactively. And that's exactly how I do it in a script. So let's say I'm at the database level, and slash, I'm in the minion database. Perfect. So what do? Right? And then I run my dir, and then for each, my curlies, right? And what else? And whatever else I'm going to do at that level, right? Then cd dot dot. And so on and so on and so on, right? So whatever you do interactively is exactly what you do in the script. It may or may not be the best way to do it in a script, but I did it like this for years, where I just kept track of where I was and just kept CDing up or down and doing things. It was a perfectly cromulent way to do that, right? But anything you do in the interactive session, you can do in the script. And that's not the same with a lot of languages, right? Things have to change a little bit when it's in a script, but not here. So there's another commandlet called get history. And I can use that in the interactive session. I'm not going to show you, I'm just going to talk about it. I can use that in the interactive session to get all the commands I run in the session. So if you work something out interactively, then you can say get history, pipe that to a text file, and then go through there and take those scripts and put them right in. Take those commands and put them right in a script. Take out what you don't want, and you're done. Because you just figured it out interactively, and everything will still work the same way in a script. We good? More or less? Get history. It's good stuff. Okay. Now let's talk about running scripts. So right now we're going to run a script that just pulls up a directory. That's it. Now, you notice I'm putting these semicolons in here. It's a really good idea to get used to. PowerShell does not require it to terminate a statement. It does if you got two separate statements on one line, right? But if you're just going to go dir, next line cd, next line something, 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 it does not require the semis. But C# does. And one of these days, if you ever push your knowledge into C#, you'll at least be used to it now. SQL doesn't require it either, and I put my semis in all the time. It's a really, really good way to, it's a good habit to get into to show yourself where each command starts and stops. It's a really good habit to get into. Don't forget your semis. And you're shaking, yeah. Even in T-SQL, even though it doesn't require it, always use your semis. Why not? It costs you nothing, and you can easily see where a statement's supposed to stop. And if you ever have like a whole bunch of statements on one line or something, right, you can regex it into separate lines by the semicolons and at least start to format it a little bit if you can't afford a formatter, right? Or if you can't go to like, what is it, prettyfire.com, something like that, right? So, we're gonna run this script. First I have to save it, don't I? So I'll just say demo, we'll just call it demo.ps1. So I think this is one of the mistakes they made when they developed this whole system. Because we're up to PowerShell 7 now, 7.4 or something like that. It's in the editor. And there's still PS1 from PowerShell 1. I'm just glad they didn't go PS2, PS3, PS4. But now we're stuck with PS1. It would have been fine just with .ps, right? Because Python is .py. So, you know, why not have a 2-character extension? But anyway, so if I wanted to run this script, I mean, from this editor, this is a professional editor that I pay for because I do a lot of PowerShell and it's worth it to me. I can just hit run, and then I can see the output. I think if it's not up, see it's frozen up on me here. And I thank God for professional tools. There we go. Let me see if I can get this back in the window. There we go. So there's my output, right? So it does some stuff for me behind the scenes. But if I want to run this from PowerShell, let me go ahead and get the folder path. And because it's got a space in there, it needs to be in quotes. So let me go home. So now, I'm in that. Now, to call a PowerShell script, you have to have the full script path. This is a security feature that they put in to keep from the man-in-the-middle attack, right? So if you've got something in memory, like a function, then what they can do is they can replace that function with their own code, and then intercept your execution and then run their code instead, right? That's a very common way that they do that. So in order to keep that from being possible, you specify the full path. Now, that can be a relative path, which you're gonna do most of the time, right? You'll cd to the directory of the script and you'll use the relative path. So instead of saying, I can't type, damn it, .ps1, I just have to say .whack. That's the relative path, right? Everybody knows relative paths. It means start from here and just go, right? That's what .whack means. Dot means here in the current folder and then the file name, right? So now when I run this, I get my file list. Is everybody good with that so far? Okay. Alrighty. Let's see, we were talking about that. Right. Now, variables work the exact same way as well. Anything you do with a variable in the interactive session, you can also do in PowerShell, or in a script. So if you want to print it, you can either do a write host, or you can, which is a commandlet, right? So we know that that's going to be write dash host, right? Verb dash noun. Or you can just type the name of the variable and it'll be printed to the screen. And there is something I wanted to show you. Let's talk about basic scripting. Now, I've got a full day class that I teach on scripting and the ins and outs of different ways of doing things. So y'all are gonna get the quick version, right? But I did want to show you something really cool in PowerShell that you can't do in a lot of languages. And again, this is just one more thing that makes it PowerShell, right? Is if I say something like, there, server equals, and I'll say codecom, right? And now I want to go to that box in SQL, then I can easily say cd colon \SQL. That's my other keyboard coming in. I'm not going to correct that. Right? So you can use parameters in paths when you CD, which makes it really, really handy when you're going across multiple boxes. Because remember we said earlier that, of course, this is any server you have access to, right? Any server you can see. If you can see it in SMS, you can see it here. So let's make a simple array and I'll show you how this works. So I'll say server equals, and we can just make an array out of this, right? So I'll say server 1, server 2. So it's just going to be a simple array. Go ahead and save that. Now what do I have to do? I have to iterate through each server, right? So I say, I start with my object. And I pipe that. What do I pipe it to? Anybody?
The percent?
For each, absolutely. Don't forget your curlies. In fact, I'm going to do that. And I'm going to put that inside there. And this is going to be, I'll say like this. I'm doing other stuff too, right? But right now I'm just going to CD to each one of them, which isn't going to work because I don't have access to any of these other servers, right? They don't exist. But this is another little quirk. So if I am in a for each loop, what is going to be the object that I use inside of this loop? $_ underscore, right. But since this is a generic list, right, what properties does it have?
Name.
Name?
GM. I don't know.
I know, right? It's not going to have any name properties. So when I say $_ dot what? What do I put there since there are no named properties? Because again, nothing there, right? Nothing. You use the entire object because that entire object is just that name, is just that entry. Do you understand?
$_ with no dot.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because we're not calling any properties, right? So the name itself, or the object itself, is $_ find the damn thing, right? Like that. So all I want to do here is say server equals that. Does everybody see that? I'm setting this local variable local to the loop, right?
Oh, it is local to the loop. Okay.
It's local to the loop. Inside these two guys, everything inside here is local. I'm setting that equal to the current object, which is going to be this, then it's going to be this, then it's going to be this. If I were pulling this list from a database,
Right.
which I can so incredibly easily do, right? Then I would have properties. Like if I were pulling it from sys databases, right? Then I would say database equals $_ dot name, because that's what it's called in sys databases, right? Or if I selected, select name from, or select name as DB name from sys databases, then I would do the as, right? So it'd be DB name. And if you have any questions, like he just said, do a GM on that guy and see what the properties are that you can use coming back from your query, right? Because every time, because if I were to take this guy right here and pull back SQL data from it, and I'll do that in a minute for you, whatever columns I selected are going to become my properties. So it maps those for you automatically, because now it's like a data row object or a data table object or something like that. I forget what it comes through as, but let's take a look real quick. So now I can say, and I'll say DBs, right? Equals, I think I do have that here. Invoke SQL command. I don't have to pass it a server name or a database because it's going to default to local, and that's all I have access to anyway. But I can say query select, let's just say star. There we go. So now I've set that, and now I print it. And you can see I get all this mess, right? So, and it's not very pretty either. But if I go, where are you? Look at my properties. Name, owner SID, is subscribed, replica ID. These are all the columns from sys databases, right? And that works for any query. You query any table, anything like that, and those property and the column names automatically become the properties. That's how you work with databases in SQL when you're doing stuff like that. So if I had, if I want to connect to my server, in fact, let's see here, what would I want to do here? If I want to connect to this and say, for each one of these databases I want to do something, then I would just do it the same way I did here, except I would be like databases, and let's say that this is coming in from, let me grab that other query. There we go. Let me grab this guy. And come up here and say, instead of this, that. Got it. Home. Equals there. So now I got a list of databases in a variable, right? And invoke SQL command and all that stuff, right? I'll go ahead and do it because besides it says plus anyway. Okay, so now I've got a list of databases from this current box because it's going to default to localhost if I don't say -s and whatnot, right? So now all I do is take DBs, type it there, and then I'll say current DB equals, right? And then I'll CD to there. CD to current database. And then do whatever I want while I'm at that level. Is everybody with me? If not, say so. Invoke SQL command. It does just what it says. There's a command line tool that comes with SQL called SQL command. This invokes it. Weird. Verb dash noun. I'm going to pass a query, saving the whole thing to a variable. Take that variable, because now it's an object, right? And I'm going to take that object, and for each one of those, so you see any object could be for each. For each one of those, I'm going to set a local variable inside of here equal to that. I don't have to. I could put this down here. But who wants to read that in a command line? Just set your variables inside, right? That's really, really good coding practice. I call it data then usage. I'm going to set my data here. This is a variable. This is the data that's coming in, right? So I'm going to set it to my variable, and then I could use this variable 1,000 more times in this for each loop, right? Because what if this name, what if I wanted to munge this name somehow, right? If I wanted to run some text strings against it or whatever, right? I wanted to like reformat it somehow, right? It may not be name, it may be something else. What if I'm bringing in, say, table name and schema, and I want to put them together with a dot in between them to make it table and schema name, right? To make it easier for the rest of the script, so I don't have to keep concatenating those together every single time I use it. Is everybody with me on that? So I would set that up here. I would say, you know, table and schema equals table name, schema name, and now we're going to get into something really nifty because I just remembered and it's really relevant here. And then I would use that variable everywhere else. And if I change the way that I want this to look, I got one place to change it. That's at the top. And then everything else will use it, right? Otherwise, if I use DB name here, and then use it 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 here, if something changes in the way this gets returned, or if I need to change it, then I gotta change it in all these places. And those text manipulations can really thicken up your code, right? You want to obscure your code as much as possible, right? You want to obscure it from the BS, and you want to, like, even if I have to call a function here to set that, that's fine. In fact, that's preferred. This is the function talk, so we're going to get into that, right? But right now, I'm going to teach you more about interpolation, because this is extremely important when you come to right here, okay? So let's get into it. All right, we're going to jump back into the interactive shell real quick. And let me see, what would be a good thing to start with? Actually, I'm gonna close this. Yep, and I'm gonna go, this is just the easy way to do it, right? And I'm gonna go here. And by the way, whenever you start PowerShell here, it's context specific. So if I right click on databases, I'll be in the database tree. If I right click on this guy, I'll be in this database and so on, right? So right now I'm gonna go with, I'm gonna stick with this one, and I'm gonna go to tables. So if I right click on tables and say start PowerShell, it puts me in tables. So that's a really nice shortcut when you're doing quick admin tasks, right? So what do I want to do here? I want to say dir. I want to pipe that to a for each. Don't forget your curlies. And now I'm just going to print something to the screen. I've got name and schema. Two properties, right? And we already know about interpolation, so I can say $_dot name followed by a dot, because I want the dot in between them, right? Followed by $_dot schema. Ah, Jesus. So I got history.jobs.history.jobs.schema. What the hell? Right? So a lot of really weirdness in here, right? And that's because of the way that interpolation works. And this is another thing that you need to really pay attention on, because I'm not going to say you can't move forward without it, because that's not true. But if you don't listen and you get home and you try something, you're going to be pissed off when it doesn't work the way it's supposed to. Because interpolating strings or interpolating variables is one thing that you're going to do all the time once you get into this. So the problem comes with the definition of a variable. So what have I done here? I have an object here that is a variable and a property name followed by a dot, followed by the same thing by the schema. Now, when I do variable interpolation, normally I say, give me that variable, and it prints the value by default, right? But I don't want the value by default. I want one of the properties. So if I do this, so there are execution, I guess we'll say constructs, right? So if I surround this in parentheses, each one of them, in parentheses, it's going to execute that code inside of there, and it's going to give me the return. You get it? So it's going to say, this is an executable phrase, this is an executable phrase, that's just a period. So I want to execute this, then I want to execute that, and I want the results. So it should give us name.schema. Actually, it should be schema.name. I need to switch those, right? So let me switch those real quick. There we go. So now when I hit enter, oh hell, I still got the dot schema and the dot name, only it put the whole thing in parentheses this time too. So it still isn't right. But remember what we said. This is variable interpolation. So right now, this isn't a variable, and this is an executable piece of code, but that doesn't make it a variable, does it? So there are things called, like, I think we officially call them like temporary variables. So temp vars, right? So we gotta take that execution and surround it and make it into a temp var, so that then it can interpolate what it actually executes. Anybody have any guesses on how we'd make that a temp var? Easier than you think. Nobody? Okay. We're going to go outside this execution, like that, and I'm just going to make it a var. Like that.
I was gonna guess the back.
Now I got what I want. And this is very common. You do this all the time, and I'm going to walk through this again because so if I want to interpolate these, I start with my double quotes on the outside, right? Because that's what makes it an interpolated string versus a literal string. If I just do this, I'm just going to get the object value, right? Which is going to be freaking everything. This is a complex object, so I don't even know if you can do that in here. I'd probably get an error, right? But since I want a property, I put the property in there, and it's going to give me the value, and then it's going to give me .schema. It's going to print that exactly, right? So I try to execute it and say, instead of giving me this, execute this entire thing and give me that property. That's what the parentheses do. Everybody with me? But unfortunately, it's variable interpolation, not property interpolation, right? Or execution interpolation. So to do that, now I have to save that as a variable. Now the value of this variable is what was executed inside here, and I get my schema. Everybody understand? Perfect. And then I put a dot between them, do the same thing for the name, and you notice how they're all in the same parentheses, and you don't have to do string building. It's all right in there. If I asked you, would you be able to explain that back to me? It's okay if you can't. It takes getting used to. It really does. You think that takes getting used to? You should have seen when I first tried to figure out how to teach that. It was like, how do I say this? Okay. One more time, just because I can, and now we're getting what we want. Right? So now, if I'm in my script, and I think that's where we left off. There we go. So if I'm in my script, and I want to, say, print those things out to the screen. In fact, let's just grab that. Right there. There we go. I'll put that in here somewhere, just like that. Now, I'm at current DB / tables.
After default, do you need databases there, boss?
I'm sorry?
After default, before current DB, do you need the word databases?
Oh, yeah, you're right. There you go.
Doing it on my own.
I'd have figured it out after 4 or 5 minutes of troubleshooting. I also need to set this server variable, right? Because that's left over from the other one. So right now, I'll just go ahead and say, I'll just use that one right there. But it could be that array, right? And it doesn't, and the beauty, again, data, then usage, right? How do I fill this variable with servers I want to go through? Don't care. Is it going to come from a text file? From an Excel? From a database? From XML? From JSON? It doesn't matter. By the time the rest of this script gets it, this has its data. Do you understand? If I need to change the way I do that, I comment this out, put the name of the JSON file in there, and it does it, right? I'll probably have a function that takes the JSON and turns each one of those into a server name, right? And it just gives me that array. But do you see what I'm saying? How do I list these databases for each server? Don't care, right? If you take it from an invoke SQL command, if you take it from a .NET call, if you take it from, it doesn't matter, right? So I get my data, I set it, then I use it. Data, then usage. Data, then usage. You'll be much happier as a coder if you do that. Everybody with me on that? So set your variables. That's why even if I've got just like this as my object like we did when we had it up here, I'll still set it to a current variable, because when you start nesting loops, for each one of these I'm going to do this, and for each one of those I'm going to do that, and for each one, keeping up with that is very hard, right? Which one of these am I in right now, right? So if you set it to a local variable and then I have another loop inside of there, I'm going to set those, then I'm going to set those, then I'm going to set those, and I always know which one I'm doing, right? You'll be a much happier scripter if you do that. So data, then usage. So here, what should happen is I should connect to the current server, except I'm not actually putting a current server in here. Yes, I am right there. So for each server, or not even for each server, because I don't have a for each for the server, do I?
You don't.
But I would. Yeah, I would. So I would just do something like this. I would say server, pipe that to my for each. Get my curlies. I'm going to take this curly down here and put it down here, because all the database stuff is going to be inside the server stuff, right? Am I getting too far ahead? Is everybody good? Okay. Now, something else that's going to make you a very happy coder. Tag your brackets. So I know which one starts where and ends where. Ah, look at that. Now I know if I need to move a bracket, or if I need to move a piece of code, automatically know where my brackets stop and start, and I don't have to, because man, if you've gotten like begins and ends misaligned in T-SQL, and how long did it take you in a big SP to get that straightened back out? Oh my God, it's taken me days before. So, in here, for each server, and in fact I should say server list, and then for each one of these, I'm going to do what? Right? So, for each server in this list, I'm going to take the first one, I'm going to set my server, I'm going to get my DBs, my list of databases, and right now, does it have a thing? Nope. It's frozen up on me again. My box has been doing that lately. There we go.
You should do that get process and kill.
Oh, yeah. And then I'll say, so I'm going to connect to that server for each one of these.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to run the query, store it in a variable. I'm going to take that var and for each it. I'm going to take the name, and I'm going to connect to that server again, all the way down to, there's the server, there's the current database and tables, and I'm going to print out the schema name and the name of the table. Does everybody see how that works? Isn't that grand? And I can even do something like this, right? I can say inside of there, I can say, right? So I want to print the current database as well.
You can print the current server too.
Yeah, you could do that too. And so And since that colon seems to mess that up, see? I'm gonna put a space in there. I could do this, right? That's an escape character. The backtick is an escape character.
That's what it was.
So, okay. So we're here. This looks like it'll work. I saved it, and now I shut that other one down, didn't I? Okay, fine. I'll just run it from here, but I'll run it in the console, and let's hope that it does what it's supposed to do. And I got some of it. Let me see how. For starters, let's do that, just to make sure. And then I got the server, blah, 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 that should do it. Can you tell I'm just kind of like winging it? Which is okay. If it fails, it fails. I'll be fine with it. Yeah, for some reason it's giving me a list of, what does it say in here? Failed to connect to database.
Yeah,
Failed to
you've got
connect
an
to
L.
server.
You've got an L in there, so it's semicolon, I think.
Ah,
Do you hear that?
yeah. Oh yeah, look at that.
And I can't tell on the bottom, I think you might need a double quote, I can't
I'm
see
going
it, it's
to do
red.
that.
Yeah, it's very.
You're gonna have to speak a little bit softer. I can still barely hear you.
I think you need a double quote after your current DB, I can't see it, it's.
No, I don't need a double quote after the current DB because they're all inside these double
Oh,
quotes.
okay.
But he's right, that red text is super hard to see. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure.
There's a tilde in there or something. After, right there.
Yeah, that's the backtick. That's the escape
You want
character.
that? Oh, okay. Wanted a space.
You want me to take that out of there for you? I'll need to just put a space in there. Okay, let's see what we get now. That's wrong. I need to be in here. Still getting the same thing. And there you go with how stuff works, right? Let me try that. Oh, that's not what I meant to do, but let's see what the output is. It may be freezing up because I actually did it right. And then again, it may not. So another quirk in looks like one process cannot be passed. Parameter name Q is ambiguous.
Server.
Try that then. See if I can remember to run that in the console.
So what were you saying about letting it run and not having any indication about progress?
Well, this is kind of like freezing up on me, so
Yeah.
it's supposed to do it. It will be doing it as it goes through. Or did it just already do it that fast? And yep, it did. So I'm gonna move on from this because something, it still doesn't like that. Oh, I know the problem. I'm getting it mixed up with the real flags. So this isn't -S, this is server instance. There we go. So it's -S in SQL command, but in invoke SQL command, it's server instance. See, I'd say I'm doing a pretty decent job of running through all these, huh? Let's go ahead and stop that. Or did it stop already? Oh, good, it stopped already. So there you go. Are there any questions about how this works? Anything at all? Doesn't matter. Beautiful.
I love it.
Okay, and that's how you go through multiple servers and do stuff, and then multiple databases. Mm. Try to keep my throat blue today. All right, so now we're gonna get into functions, which means we need to discuss contractual programming. How much time do I have?
It is 1:34, so like 11 minutes.
11 minutes. So we're gonna talk about contracts for 11 minutes, and we'll talk about the rest of it because we're gonna get into custom classes, right? And I'll spend a little bit of that time on functions, but functions are easy. Okay, contractual programming. Let's say that you have a plumber come to your house. He says, oh yeah, I see the problem. You've got, stuff clogging your main drain and we need to snake it out. And then he brings you a little contract, right? And says, here's what we're gonna do. Here's what the labor is. Here's what the parts are gonna be. Sign down here and you agree to pay this much, right? So it's gonna be $700 to snake out your main drain, right? That's actually kind of accurate, huh?
Yeah. All the homeowners in the room.
And you say, all right, I'm gonna get back to work and you let me know when you're done. 4 hours goes by and he still hasn't come back to you. So you decide to go check on him. And you go outside. You don't see him. The truck is still there. You go inside, you start looking for him, and you notice he's in there painting your living room. What do you say? What the shit? Right?
Right.
Dude, right? He's not gonna do more than he's contracted for, right? And you don't want a plumber painting your living room, you want a painter painting your living room, right? Or if you want it done really bad, you want to do it yourself. So that's the contract that you have with him. You're gonna pay him this, and he's gonna do this. That's it, right? All programming that you do should be contractual programming. Let's look at a really good example of getDate in SQL. GetDate is a function. And it does what? It gets the date, right?
That's about it.
It gets the current date even, right?
And time.
And that's all it does. What does it expect from you in return? Nothing. You say get date, boom, doesn't take any parameters or anything, doesn't expect anything, right? So that's a volunteer function. But let's say that you want to now cast that date as a string. What does cast expect from you? It expects two things, right? It wants the object that you want to cast and what you want to cast it to, right? So it says you make a contract with it when you call it. You say, tell you what, if I give you these 2 bits of information, you're going to give me this back. Bet. Right? But how does it do what it's doing inside? Have you ever seen inside the cast function? I haven't.
Who cares?
I have no idea. Right. Who cares? Right? You don't care how the plumber does his job. Well, I thought all I had to do was snake out the drain, but it turns out we had to this and this and this and this and this. You just got a good deal because he was going to unclog your drain for $700, right? Whatever he has to do it. If he comes in there and like kicks the pipe and knocks some stuff loose and it starts flowing, you just got screwed. If he has to like dig up your yard and all that stuff, hey, you said you were going to unclog the drain for $700, right? You just got a great deal. You don't care what it takes to get it done, as long as it gets done, as long as it gives you back what you're supposed to get back. On the old enterprise diagrams, right? You used to see these big clouds, right? It would say, you know, server, router, gateway, cloud, right? It was always this cloud on the thing. And that stands for, I have no idea what's in here, right? And SPs are the same way. When you write an SP for an end user, that SP is a contract of sorts, right? It's an input contract if nothing else. You have no idea, the user has no idea what the SP does inside of there. It just knows that it either gets data back or it just has some function performed, right? But right now we'll say it gets data back. We just know that it gets data back. But we have no idea that could come through here and, you know, do tons of stuff in SQL and then do queries in Oracle, right, through open row set, and then merge those two and then finally give your piece of data back, this one single little piece of data back, right? Or it could just hard code that and say, return this string, right? We have no idea what it does. And that's the way it's supposed to be. That's where we start getting into functions and where we start getting into the custom classes that we're going to talk about next, because every single function does a single thing. And it does it very well, and it moves on, right? Anybody? I do one thing, I do it very well, and move on.
I don't remember.
Winchester,
Ah,
when he first got to MASH.
yeah.
Anyway, so we're going to see that in spades. So could we turn these into functions? Oh yeah. Should we? Yeah. We'll see why not.
Okay.
Right? We are going to write functions soon. She's told me we've only got like 4 minutes left. We are going to write functions soon, but if I were going to break this up, and we'll break it up in the next class, I would probably take this DB list and turn it into a function. And then I would take this guy and turn it into a function. So that if I change the way I get my DB list, I change it in one place, and everywhere I call that function picks up that new method, right? In object-oriented programming, we call that dry. Don't repeat yourself, right? I shouldn't have this line in 40 different places in a script. Even if my function is one line long, and that line is right here, right? Even if it only returns the results of any query, I'm still going to put it in a function, because if I need to add flags to this, like query timeout, connection timeout, stuff like that, right? Then I get it everywhere, automatically, just by changing this one spot. So even a one-line function that does one single thing, and in this case, what is that one single thing? Returning a query result, right? It's not going to be tied to any particular one. Hell, I'll pass the query in as a parameter, right? So I've got this one line. I can even pass in the server name. Everything. I pass everything in the parameters. We're going to talk about that when we actually do functions. So I'm going to pass all that stuff in. And now I've got a function with one line, but it's going to be a very useful one line, because anything I need to add to this line is automatically going to be picked up by everything else. Don't repeat yourself. Don't put this line in 1,000 places. Make it one function call, then call the function from 1,000 places. Absolutely, go for it. Go with me? All right, take a break.
Yay!
Sit down.